My husband told me, "Don't embarrass me at my office party." So I brought our joint tax return and asked his boss why he listed his assistant's spa day under client gifts. The room went dead silent. But that wasn't even the revenge part. Because what came next? That was just the nudge. The real fall? That would take a little more time, and a lot more precision. Let me start with this: I'm not the dramatic type. I'm the person you call when your curtain rod falls at 11 p.m. Or when you need someone to measure crown molding without an attitude. I run a home design consultancy out of the garage in our house in Champaign, Illinois. I like routines. I label my coffee beans. I plan dinner a week ahead, including the Thursday night whatever's left in the fridge stir-fry. My name is Brooke Anderson, and until a few months ago, I thought my husband loved me. His name is Ryan. He's 38. Tall, clean-shaven, always smells faintly like cedar and strategy. He works in corporate consulting, one of those jobs that sounds important but mostly involves giving PowerPoints to people too tired to push back. He talks about scaling vision and solutioneering. Honestly, I never really understood what he did. I just knew he left early, came home late, and talked a lot about legacy. And I bought into it, the legacy thing. The idea that we were building something together. A house, a life, the kind of marriage our nieces would point to one day and say, "That's the dream." We'd been married for 7 years. Long enough to finish each other's sentences, but not so long that either of us had gone gray. At least, not visibly. Things weren't perfect, but I thought they were solid. You know? Then last October, I noticed something strange. Ryan started getting texts at weird hours, 9:47 p.m., 11:22 p.m. When I'd glance over, he'd casually flip his phone face down. At first, I told myself I was being paranoid. Work stress. Project deadlines. Late-night Slack messages, probably. But then he changed the passcode on his phone. I asked why. He barely looked up from his laptop. Security update, he mumbled. Company policy. 2 weeks later, I found a receipt from a boutique hotel downtown. Saturday night. Spa package and room service for 2. That same weekend, I'd been in Peoria helping my sister move. I remember texting Ryan a photo of her cat stuck in a box. He responded with a thumbs-up emoji. No questions. No follow-up. Just distance. I confronted him that night. Sort of. What did you do last weekend? He barely blinked. Caught up on reading. Slept. Why? No reason. And I remember thinking, he's lying. But I didn't push. Because the truth is, some part of me didn't want confirmation. I wasn't ready to have the floor fall out from under me. Then came the office party. Every December, Ryan's firm throws this huge holiday event. Rooftop venue. Open bar. Catered sushi. The kind of place where people drink $1,000 whiskey but talk about it like it's just decent. I usually went, smiled, made polite conversation about the color of the year and tile backsplash trends, then left early. This time, Ryan practically begged me to come. Just don't embarrass me, he said one morning while buttoning his shirt. These people are image-focused. Have I ever embarrassed you? He hesitated. You just ask a lot of questions. Something about the way he said it, like being curious was a character flaw, sat wrong with me. But again, I smiled. I nodded. And that night, I did my hair, put on the black wrap dress he always complimented, and arrived right on time. That afternoon, though, something had nagged at me. I'd been reorganizing our home office, a nesting habit I go into whenever I feel emotionally unsettled, and came across a stack of tax documents Ryan left in the printer tray. I wasn't snooping. They were just there. Curiosity tugged harder than fear. So I looked. Page 2, bottom half, business expenses. There it was. Employee travel reimbursement, J. Martin. Client gift, spa package, J.M. Meals, incidentals, Chicago, 3 nights, J.M. My hand started shaking. Not from shock. From recognition. Jenna Martin. His assistant. Mid-20s. Always polished. The kind of woman who said oops with a laugh when she missed a deadline. I'd met her once, maybe twice. She'd worn expensive perfume and called me ma'am with a smirk. He was claiming her on our taxes. As a write-off. Like she was a hotel lamp. Like she was office furniture. I stared at the document for a full minute, letting it settle. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was financial. Cold. Tidy. Calculated. That's when I printed the page. Just one. Folded it into a manila folder. And tucked it into my purse for the party. I didn't plan anything beyond that. Honestly, I just wanted to see the look on his face when he realized I knew. I wasn't thinking about Jenna. Or his boss. Or the fallout. Not yet. The venue was gorgeous, string lights, glass walls, city skyline glowing behind the open bar. I found Ryan near the catering table. He kissed my cheek like nothing was wrong. "You look incredible," he said. "You look nervous," I replied, smooth as satin. He laughed. A little too loudly. Then he led me around the room like a tour guide introducing a high-maintenance guest. I smiled, nodded, shook hands. Until we found ourselves in a tight circle of executives, including Jenna. She smiled at me like we were old friends. "Oh my gosh, Brooke, right? Ryan talks about you all the time." I smiled back. "Funny. He never talks about you. Except on our taxes." The color drained from her face. I pulled out the folder and unfolded the document in front of the group. Ryan's boss leaned in. "What's this?" he asked. "Just a snippet from our joint filing," I said casually. Seems Ryan's been quite generous with the company card. And even more generous with our deductions. The silence that followed was almost musical. No one laughed. No one moved. Just Jenna, shifting from one stiletto to the other. And Ryan, swallowing hard. He reached for my arm. "Brooke, can we talk? Privately?" I stepped back. "You said not to embarrass you," I said. "But maybe you should have handled that before you started claiming your mistress as a business write-off." And I left. That should have felt like the victory. But the truth? I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. I drove home in silence. Changed out of the dress. Sat on the edge of the bed we used to share. And stared at the closet, half full, half empty. Like everything else in our life. Then I opened our joint bank account. That's when it hit me. He'd already moved money. Quietly. Systematically. Over the last 6 weeks, he'd been transferring chunks out, labeling them quarterly bonuses and investment transfers. It totaled nearly $30,000. And I hadn't seen a dime of it. He wasn't just cheating. He was preparing. That was the real betrayal. Not just the affair. Not even the money. But the way he'd erased me from our shared life, slowly, like I was a stain he could bleach out. And I realized then, that tax form was never the revenge. It was just the proof. The revenge? Oh. That would come later. I didn't go to the firm's New Year's gala. But I saw the photos later, Ryan with his arm around Jenna, her lipstick perfectly red, his smile perfectly fake. Someone had tagged me by mistake, probably out of habit, and for a moment, my stomach clenched like it had forgotten the truth. He looked so at ease, standing there with his champagne glass, talking to the same people who had watched me humiliate him 3 weeks earlier. Maybe they thought I'd vanished out of shame. Maybe that's what he told them, that I couldn't handle it, that I'd gone off to heal. If only they knew. After that night at the party, I stayed quiet. It's strange how silence can feel louder than screaming. Ryan must have expected tears, fights, maybe even a desperate call at 2 in the morning. Instead, I gave him nothing. He came home once after the holidays to pack more clothes. He moved around the house like a stranger afraid to touch anything. When I offered him coffee, he blinked, confused, like he'd forgotten I was capable of being kind. He told me we needed a little space to recenter. I nodded. He said it wasn't about Jenna, it was about clarity. I smiled politely, the same way you smile at someone explaining bad directions. When he suggested a temporary separation, I told him that made sense. He left the next day, relief practically written on his back as he walked to his car. The moment the door closed, I let myself slide to the kitchen floor, back against the cabinet, knees pulled tight to my chest. I didn't cry much, just one of those short, broken sobs that hit before you even know you're making a sound. The house was so quiet afterward that I could hear the refrigerator hum like a pulse. The next morning, I got up and made coffee anyway, 1 mug, not 2. The silence stayed, but it started to feel less like an enemy and more like a roommate. I began moving through my days in slow motion. I answered emails with one-line replies. I canceled client consultations until further notice. When my sister called, I let it go to voicemail. Her message was gentle but sharp. Brooke, you can't just hide. He's out there parading that woman around. You can't let him win. I listened twice, then deleted it. I wasn't hiding. I was learning how to disappear on my own terms. Ryan, of course, was thriving, or performing it well. His social media accounts came back to life, full of curated fresh start captions and wide shots of city views from his new condo. In one photo, Jenna leaned against the balcony railing, wearing his watch. The same one I'd given him for his promotion. He'd probably told her some story about finding it in a drawer. I scrolled through the comments, heart emojis, coworkers writing things like, "You deserve happiness, man," and "Glad you're doing better." I closed the app before I could finish the thread. That night, I caught myself scrolling again anyway. I hated how my hand still moved on its own, like my brain hadn't caught up to reality. For a moment, I even typed out a message to him, just his name, Ryan, then deleted it before pressing send. I set the phone face down and told myself I'd never do that again. Still, a part of me wanted him to call. I wanted him to say he missed me, that he'd made a mistake. The thought disgusted me and comforted me at the same time. I took another sip of wine and whispered out loud, "You're allowed to want the apology you'll never get." Then I laughed, because saying it made it sound pathetic, and maybe that was the point. Weeks passed. I didn't run into many people because I barely left the house. The few times I did, I could feel the pity before anyone even spoke. In small towns like ours, gossip travels like pollen. At the grocery store, I ran into Mel, one of the office wives, near the cereal aisle. She reached for the same box I did, our hands brushing, and her smile faltered into something rehearsed. "Oh, Brooke," she said softly, like she was speaking to a widow. "You look good. Are you doing okay?" I tilted my head, giving her the faintest smile. "Doing okay? You know, after everything." She trailed off, cheeks flushing. "Ryan and, Jenna," I finished for her. "Don't worry. You can say it." She fidgeted with her ring, glancing at the shoppers around us. People say you handled it so gracefully. I told them that's just who you are. Gracefully, I repeated. That's one word for it. She laughed nervously. Well, you're better off. Everyone can see that. Can they? I asked, keeping my tone light. Because last I checked, he's still getting drinks paid for by the company, and I'm still paying off half the mortgage on a house he no longer lives in. Her face went pale. I didn't mean. Oh, I know. I smiled again, calm, polite, perfectly measured. But between us, Mel, this isn't the end of my story. I left her in the aisle with her jaw still half open, and by the time I reached my car, I could practically feel her fingers dialing someone to tell them exactly what I'd said. That's the thing about small-town whispers, you can weaponize them if you know how to aim. At home, I poured myself a drink, sat at my desk in the garage, and opened my laptop. For the first time in weeks, I didn't check his social media or stare at my inbox. I opened a spreadsheet instead. Line by line, I started reviewing every tax record, every expense report, every reimbursement Ryan had filed in the past 2 years. There were names I didn't recognize, purchases that didn't fit. He'd been playing accountant with our marriage long before the affair started, moving money around, claiming miscellaneous business costs that didn't exist. The next morning, I went to the library, the small one behind the high school, where no one ever bothers to look for you. I checked out books on small business fraud, corporate ethics, and one about financial whistleblowing. I didn't know what I was looking for exactly, but I knew there was something buried in those numbers. One of the librarians, a quiet man named Ed, noticed me coming in several times that week. Starting a new project? He asked one afternoon, sliding my card through the scanner. Something like that, I said. Researching for work? I met his eyes. No. Foreclosure. He nodded slowly, maybe sensing he shouldn't ask more. That night, I called Harper, my best friend since college and the only person who hadn't treated me like a broken thing. She showed up half an hour later with takeout and 2 bottles of Pinot. We sat on my couch eating pad thai, the kind of silence between us that only exists with people who know your history. Finally, she set down her fork. He's smug right now, she said. I know. He thinks you're sitting here folding in half. I smiled, though it didn't reach my eyes. Let him think that. Harper tilted her head. You've got something brewing, don't you? Not yet, I said. But I'm paying attention. She grinned. Good. Because I'd hate for you to waste all that intelligence on being polite. After she left, I walked into what used to be Ryan's office. His smell was fading, but it still lingered faintly on the curtains, that expensive cedar cologne he thought made him smell successful. I pulled open his desk drawers and stared at the stacks of neatly folded receipts, all labeled, all printed. I didn't touch them yet. I just wanted to see the order of his chaos. Later that week, a thick envelope slid under my front door. My name typed neatly on the front. Inside, a letter from his lawyer outlining the terms of an amicable dissolution. They offered me the house, half the furniture, and the smallest possible share of his so-called professional assets. There was even a line about protecting reputations, a polite way of saying, keep your mouth shut and we'll let you live in peace. I read it twice, then poured coffee directly onto it and tossed it into the sink. I didn't even bother to call a lawyer back. If Ryan thought I'd settle quietly, he didn't understand me at all. 2 days later, I got an email from Jenna. Just one line, I hope we can all move on with grace. Grace. The irony made me laugh out loud. I replied simply, we will. Some of us just have further to go. The truth is, Jenna wasn't dumb. Manipulative, yes, but not dumb. She'd been angling for Ryan's spot in that company long before they started sleeping together. I remembered one afternoon last spring when she'd dropped by our house unannounced with a stack of papers for Ryan to sign before Monday. She'd stood in my kitchen, hair pulled back tight, pretending not to notice me watching her pour herself a glass of water. "You must get lonely here during the day," she'd said with that soft smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Ryan works so hard. You're lucky to have someone that dedicated." I had smiled back then too, but now, replaying that moment, I saw it for what it was, a warning dressed as small talk. In early February, I started dressing differently. No more floral prints. No soft edges. My clothes became structured, clean lines, deliberate choices. I wanted to look like someone who didn't flinch. I started wearing my hair up, not because I cared about style, but because I didn't want anything falling in my face while I worked. And I did work. Quietly, relentlessly. I made a folder on my desktop labeled Blueprint_B, an old designer's habit, giving everything a name that sounded harmless. Inside it, I collected everything I found: receipts, emails, transactions, copies of filings I shouldn't have had access to but did. One evening in March, I saw them downtown. Ryan and Jenna. They were walking hand in hand, laughing about something, sharing a pastry like a pair of carefree teenagers. I stood on the opposite side of the street, watching from behind the reflection of a storefront window. She leaned into him, and he looked down at her with that same easy charm he'd once reserved for me. For a second, it hit, the ache, the loss, the weight of all the things I'd once thought were permanent. Then it passed. I didn't feel bitter anymore. Just certain. As they crossed the street, Ryan glanced around like he sensed something but couldn't place it. He never saw me. He wouldn't have recognized me anyway. I whispered, more to myself than to him, "Enjoy it while it lasts." He thought I meant the croissant. His assistant sent me an email by mistake. I didn't delete it. I read it once, then again, and on the third pass, I stopped pretending it was just another careless work message. Jenna had sent it to me out of muscle memory, I guess, her fingers still used to typing Brooke when attaching expense logs. The subject line was, "Travel Summary, March." Just bullet points. Hotel charges. Uber receipts. A full spa treatment at a place in St. Louis, the first recognized from our anniversary trip 3 years ago. And everything was tagged as a business expense. The trip was, apparently, for client development. I didn't reply. I didn't forward it to anyone. I saved the email, printed it out, and slid it into the expanding folder I'd labeled Blueprint_B. And then, for the first time in weeks, I stood in my kitchen and laughed, not bitterly, not sarcastically. Just a quiet, stunned laugh. They had gotten so bold they were now sloppy. And sloppy is the first symptom of someone who thinks they've won. But for a moment, just a moment, I felt something unexpected. I opened my phone and went to Ryan's profile. I looked at their latest photo, standing arm in arm outside a new cafe, captioned "Grateful for the climb, stronger for the fall." I stared at that smile. His hand on her waist. The way he looked completely untouched by what he'd done to me. And right there, holding the phone like it might burn a hole in my palm, I whispered something I didn't expect: "I miss you." It made my stomach twist. I hated that I meant it, even for a second. But grief doesn't move in a straight line, and love doesn't always die with betrayal. Sometimes, it limps along behind you, dragging memories you wish you could forget. Then my phone slipped out of my hand and hit the floor. The screen didn't crack, but it jolted me out of whatever ghost I'd been chasing. I picked it up, turned it off, and placed it in the drawer with the broken charger and old birthday cards. That's where it belonged now, in a pile of things I didn't need anymore but couldn't throw away just yet. The next day, I sent the expense email to someone else, not anyone close to Ryan, not yet. I sent it anonymously to a mid-level accountant at the firm, someone I'd met once at a holiday party who had seemed sharp and slightly underappreciated. No message. No context. Just the receipts. I didn't expect anything to come of it immediately, and I didn't care if it did. It was a breadcrumb, one piece of a larger trail I was leaving for someone to eventually follow. Later that week, I met Harper at a coffee shop near the courthouse. She walked in with that look, the one that meant she knew I had something to say but wasn't going to push until I said it. "Please tell me you sent that email on purpose," she said before even sitting down. "I did," I answered, stirring my tea slowly. "Just enough to make them sweat." Harper leaned in. "You're playing chess." "I'm playing Jenga," I said. "Pulling pieces out until it all collapses." She smirked, then glanced around to make sure no one was listening. "You're scaring me a little." I smiled without humor. "Good." It was then that she reminded me of something I'd forgotten, a dinner party from last spring, back when Jenna was still just his assistant. I remembered Jenna showing up late, wearing a cream silk blouse that was entirely wrong for the weather, and bringing a bottle of wine labeled "for special occasions." She'd said it with a wink, but not to Ryan. To me. I'd brushed it off then, thinking she was just awkward. But now, I could see it clearly, she had always been performing. Not for him. For me. Measuring me. Testing the boundaries. She had been laying the groundwork even then, playing sweet, overstepping in small, deniable ways. Asking to borrow my scarf because she was so chilly after dinner. Bringing me a candle just because. Calling me be like we were best friends. I had missed it. And that made me angrier than anything else. Later that week, I opened my laptop to find a message from a reporter I didn't recognize. She was writing a profile on entrepreneurial couples and wanted to fact-check a few things before publishing. My stomach dropped. There was no universe where I belonged in a story about Jenna and Ryan. I didn't reply. But I didn't delete the message either. Instead, I started typing, not to her, but to Elijah, the quiet, sharp lawyer I'd met 2 weeks earlier. I told him we might need to move sooner than planned. His reply came an hour later, "Tell me when." "We're ready." That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, my mind spinning with images of that dinner party, of Jenna's careful smile, of Ryan's hand brushing her back like it didn't mean anything. I finally got up around 3 a.m., went into the garage, and turned on every light. I opened Blueprint_B, spread the contents across the work table, and just stared at them, the photos, the financial records, the printed emails. All the proof. All the leverage. I should have felt powerful. Instead, for one fragile second, I felt terrified. What if it didn't work? What if no one cared? What if they twisted it into something else, made me look crazy, bitter, unstable? I nearly put the whole folder back in the drawer. But then, right as I was reaching for it, my email pinged again. It was from someone inside the firm, the accountant I'd anonymously sent the expense logs to. No name, no subject, just a single sentence, "You're not the only one watching." I stared at it for a long time. My hands were shaking, but I wasn't scared anymore. I was furious. The next day, Ryan called me. It was the first time I'd heard his voice in over a month. "Hey," he said, like we still talked, like he hadn't left the house we built together to play house with someone half my emotional depth. "Just wanted to check in. See where your head's at with everything." I didn't answer immediately. Let the silence stretch. "Jenna and I are thinking about buying a place," he added. "But I'd rather wrap up our stuff first. Clean breaks are easier." I let out a soft hum. Just make sure it's not under the same LLC you've been filing business expenses through, I said. There was a pause. Just long enough for him to understand that I knew. Then, with a light laugh he couldn't quite fake, he said, "What's that supposed to mean?" I didn't answer. He hung up first. 2 days later, Harper forwarded me a company-wide email someone had leaked. It was a revised expense policy, tight restrictions, new oversight, and a mandatory audit of past reimbursements. The wording was clinical, but I could read the subtext. Someone was panicking. And it wasn't me. By now, I could feel the shift. People were beginning to question things. An old colleague from Ryan's previous firm emailed me out of the blue, asking if I'd heard that one of the senior partners had suddenly gone quiet. Rumors about internal investigations. Ryan's last press mention had been quietly removed from the firm's website. Even his LinkedIn had gone curiously silent. Still, I kept my distance. No gloating. No messages. I wanted him to wonder, not just what I knew, but how I knew. The only time I let my mask slip was when I found the necklace. It was tucked into the pocket of a winter coat I hadn't worn since last year. A gold locket I'd given Ryan for our anniversary, the one I had engraved with a phrase from our wedding vows, "For all your seasons." I held it for a long time, feeling the weight of it in my palm. I almost threw it out. Almost. But then I realized something. I didn't want to destroy it. I wanted him to see it again. So I mailed it to his office, in a box with no return address, wrapped in the same velvet pouch I'd once used when I surprised him after work. Let him wonder who had it. Let her see it and feel the chill. Let the past haunt them in its own quiet way. Because this wasn't about burning it all down anymore. This was about precision. And the match was already lit. She toasted her new title with champagne, standing beside Ryan under soft string lights in their firm's rooftop lounge, a hired photographer snapping photos of her diamond ring and the city skyline behind her. The caption underneath the picture said, "Couldn't have done it without my partner, in business and life." His smile looked forced. Not because he wasn't proud. Because he had no idea what was already set in motion beneath his feet. I had been patient, almost too patient, but I needed the moment to land perfectly. I didn't want noise. I wanted precision. So the first strike wasn't a legal letter or a confrontation. It was an anonymous tip submitted through the company's internal ethics portal, an option Ryan once bragged about installing to keep up appearances. I wrote it in Jenna's voice. Polished but nervous. Conflicted. "I don't want to hurt anyone," I typed, "but I've been asked to submit receipts that don't match real meetings. I feel like I've become part of something unethical." I even threw in a line about being afraid of retaliation. The system timestamped it, logged it, and flagged it as high priority because of the internal keywords. The next day, an audit was quietly initiated, not just of Ryan, but of his entire team. Including Jenna. 2 days later, Elijah delivered the real blow, a formal declaration severing me from the LLC Ryan had registered in our marriage, along with attached financial records showing misuse of shared assets and unreimbursed personal expenditures that could no longer be ignored. The documents didn't accuse him directly. They didn't have to. They simply raised questions that begged answers, loud, expensive answers. Ryan didn't call me that night. Jenna did. Her voice was breathy, clipped. "You think you're clever," she said without even saying hello. "But this is pathetic." "I'm sorry," I replied, setting my mug down calmly. "Who is this?" "You know exactly who this is." I paused for a second, then added, "If you're calling about a legal matter, I'd recommend you speak with my attorney. His name's Elijah." There was silence on the line, and I heard her breathing. Then, in a tone that almost cracked, she said, "Do you think this makes you strong?" watching from the sidelines while everything falls apart. I didn't answer at first. Then I said, "No, Jenna. What makes me strong is that I know exactly how it ends, and I'm not on the floor with you." She hung up, and I sat there, letting the silence wrap around me like armor. Within a week, the firm had taken them both off the website. No announcement. No tribute. Just gone. When I checked the team page again, it was like they had never been part of it. Their bios were scrubbed, their titles reassigned. A junior associate was now interim head of client relations. The board was already moving to protect its image. But the press wasn't far behind. One of the firm's clients, a major development group, pulled out of a multi-million-dollar project. The reason? Concerns over internal oversight. A journalist picked up the leak and started digging. I didn't give her anything directly. But someone did. Maybe Harper. Maybe one of the investors who realized too late that they'd backed a man who couldn't separate his ego from his expense account. Either way, the headlines started to change. Phrases like executive misconduct and romantic entanglement involving company funds began to circulate. Ryan finally called me. Not from the office. From his personal number. It rang twice before I picked up. "You win," he said, without preamble. I wasn't playing, I answered, knowing full well that wasn't true. "You've destroyed everything I built." "No, Ryan. You did that all on your own." I just held up the mirror. He sighed, like the weight of the world was finally landing on his shoulders. "They're going to sue me. They're trying to say this was all fraud. If you listed romantic getaways under client meetings, it probably is." He went quiet. Then he asked, quieter than I'd ever heard him, "Was it worth it?" That question sat between us like a challenge. So I told him the truth. Every second. When we hung up, I laughed. Out loud. Alone, in my kitchen, in the same house he tried to trade for a condo and an Instagram caption. It wasn't the laugh of revenge. It was relief, the kind of laughter that comes when you stop carrying someone else's shame. Jenna wasn't faring better. I heard from a mutual friend that she tried to land a new job, something in marketing, I think, but the firm that interviewed her backed out after internal vetting. Apparently, her name was flagged in connection with the ethics complaint. She'd been telling people she was on sabbatical, which sounded less like self-care and more like damage control. The final blow came when she attempted to post a soft rebrand on social media, a new professional headshot, a motivational quote, something about resilience. The comments weren't kind. I didn't add anything. I didn't need to. Watching her try to spin something clean out of the mess she helped make was like watching someone wipe a shattered mirror. Pointless and painful. The firm issued a formal statement eventually, bland and vague, but publicly distancing itself from recent improprieties. They called it a learning opportunity. I called it a cleanup. Harper came over that weekend with a bottle of Prosecco and a bag of fresh croissants. She dropped her purse on the counter and smiled like someone who had seen the whole script and loved the ending. "You're glowing," she said. "I'm sleeping," I replied. "It's a new thing I'm trying." She poured the drinks, clinked her glass to mine, and said, "To doing nothing, and letting karma finish the job." I grinned. To being underestimated. We sat on the porch as the sun settled behind the trees, warm plates on our laps and the kind of silence that isn't empty, it's earned. I told her about the investor who sent me a thank you message. About the accountant who had slipped me the internal records. About the journalist who called again, asking if I wanted to go on record. I declined, of course. I had no interest in being the center of the storm. I just wanted to be the one who started the rain. "You know," Harper said between sips, "there's a word for this." "What?" "Closure." I let that sit for a second. Then nodded. No. This is something better. What's better than closure? Control. We both laughed. A few days later, I received a package in the mail. No note, no sender. Just a small envelope and the locket I had once given Ryan, the one engraved for all your seasons. I stared at it for a while, then dropped it in the donation box. Let someone else rewrite that chapter. I was done with it. I didn't rebuild my life. I redesigned it. New clients. New focus. A new office that smelled like cedar and fresh paint, with sunlit windows and no ghosts in the corners. I was working with people who valued trust, communication, and actual professionalism, wild concepts, I know. The last time I saw Ryan was in passing, months later, at a local business event I almost didn't attend. He looked older. Smaller. Like someone who was trying to dress like his old self but didn't quite fit the clothes anymore. He saw me. Tried to hold my gaze. I nodded politely. Nothing more. Not a word. He looked away first. As I walked past him, I felt nothing. No spark of anger, no ghost of love, no ache of regret. Just stillness. Peace. They thought they erased me. All they did was give me a clean page. And I wrote the ending myself.